Hello and good morning, you guys. I'm so excited for another amazing week of art club. This week is all about mosaics. So I'm wondering, have you heard the word mosaic before? Just think in your head, have I heard this word before? And if you have, do you think you know what it means? Because that's what we're going to be working all on this week, our mosaics. Now, if you're like, I don't know what mosaics are, I haven't heard, or maybe I've heard of it, and I just want a refresher, well, let's just learn a little bit about mosaics before we begin our week of fun here. So, starting off, we're going to learn all about mosaics. So what are mosaics? It's a fun word, isn't it? Sure is. So mosaic is a special form of art that uses small objects to create larger pictures. So taking a whole bunch of little things, putting them together to make a big picture, kind of like this. Okay, so do we see how there's like a whole bunch of little shapes and they're put together in order to make a fish swimming amongst the seaweed, right? So that would be an example of a mosaic. So how are mosaics made? Well, mosaic is a form of art where the surface is covered by small pieces of objects, okay? Traditionally speaking, it's like stones, tiles, glass, things like that fit tightly together. And then when these pieces are carefully placed with color and size, they can create really cool geometric designs or even pictures like the one we just saw and like this. So here's another example of a mosaic, and you can see how this one has a little bit more variety in like the shapes and the types of materials that are being used, so it doesn't all have to be exactly the same type of stuff that's included in it like the previous fish one was. Alright, and I'm going to disappear for a second here, you guys, because I want you to be able to see the words and my head's going to get in the way otherwise. So you won't be able to see me, but you can still hear me. So the next question we might have about mosaics is, what are mosaics made out of? So historically speaking, mosaics can be made out of tiles, glass, stones, things like that, okay? Making mosaics takes a lot of time and practice and patience. You know, when you're putting all these tiny objects together, that takes some time. So we're not going to be using glass or tiles or stone. We're going to be using paper for ours. Something a little bit more simple, a little bit less expensive, good starting material, right? So when making mosaics, you often choose what you're going to be making out of the color. You might depict a person or a landscape. We are going to be making snowmen for this example. So we're going to, as we create the mosaics, you lay the pieces out first. You kind of place them where you think you want them. And then once you've got things kind of lined up where you're like, yeah, this looks good, I like how this is turning out, then you're going to apply it with something called an adhesive. So an adhesive, what does that mean? You've maybe heard of adhesive bandage before, adhesive tape. So what does adhesive mean? Well, it's something that is sticky and it's going to help things stick together. So common adhesives for traditional mosaic building would be things like mortar and cement. However, since we're going to be using paper as our medium, can you think of an adhesive that works really good for sticking two pieces of paper together? Oh yeah, you guys, we are going to be using glue. So, be ready for that. Okay, so we are going to, like I said, we'll be making mosaics throughout the week. And the first project we're going to be making our snowman. So we're going to want to find some sort of a container. It could be a plastic bag, it could be a little jar, a box, something where we can keep all these tiny little pieces of paper that we're about to be cutting, though, because if you've ever cut a ton of little pieces of paper, you know they get everywhere, right? It's like confetti. So we want to make sure that we are saving it somewhere because we won't be getting to the gluing portion until our next art club. So somewhere kind of safe. So feel free to pause this video if you need to and take a look around your home to try to find either plastic baggies, jars, something tiny you can store your pieces of paper into. And so what exactly is it that we are cutting the paper for? Once again, I said it was snowmen, but you might want to see what this is going to look like when it's all done. So I've got a little picture above my head here, but let's check it out a little bit bigger. Oops. We'll go to this one right here. There we go. So this is what they are going to look like when they're done. So you can see we're going to need a lot of white little pieces of paper cut up, right? Lots of white ones. But then I also want you to notice that as far as, you know, when you're kind of giving your snowman accessories, maybe a hat or scarf, arms, the face, buttons, whatever you're choosing to add. Maybe like this one's got a little broom, which is cute, right? Those are adorable. Maybe some earmuffs. You'll get to choose the colors. So we're all going to start off today by cutting a whole sheet of white piece of paper into all these geometric or random shapes. So lots of times they end up being kind of like squares and triangles, rhombuses. You'll see once I get to the example part here. But then you'll also get to choose what other colors you might want. Now I want you to notice though, with those other colors, we're not going to need as much. I'll talk about that more later, but I just wanted you to get a little visual of that right here. All right, so let's get to cutting, shall we? So you can see I've got my little station set up here. Got my scissors ready to go. This is my container. And you can see I've already got some of those pieces cut. They're all about, I would say, kind of in between the size of like a nickel and a quarter. Okay, and we've got various shapes in here. Some of them are, oh, I'm seeing lots of triangles. I do have squares in here, I promise you. I'm just not seeing, maybe they're more towards the bottom. There we go, there's some squares in here too. So all kinds of different shapes, and even the sizes do vary a little bit. So how did I make those? Well, what I have found, I think is the easiest way, is to start by taking your piece of paper. This is obviously what it would look like to start, but I've already started cutting mine into smaller strips. So we're going to cut it into strips like this. And once again, there is no exact size, but I think somewhere kind of in between the width of a nickel and a quarter tend to kind of work best. And then once we've got that long strip, then I'm just going to start cutting maybe some squares, some rectangles, some triangles. I'll move it on an angle like that. Maybe I go back to a few more squares and rectangles and some more triangles. Maybe there's a rhombus in there or two. Okay, so once again, we're just kind of cutting them into littler pieces. So I'm going to do that with my entire white sheet of paper. So if you need to pause this video to do that, feel free. For sake of not having a 20-minute video though, I'm going to just continue on with our other colors. So once you're done with the white, you're going to move on to, for a lot of us, we're going to probably want to use black for like the eyes and the mouth, right? Represents the coal that usually we think of when we think of snowmen. So you might choose to do shapes kind of like this. So imagine